Hello and welcome to the Veilring Tapes. Every story here is true. It happened to a real person, and they wrote it down or said it out loud, so the rest of us would know. Tonight, I'll share a few of them with you. A lot of you come back here every night, and that means a lot to me. These stories stay with people. That's just what they do. Before we start, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I read all of them. And if you like these stories, a quick like and subscribe really help. Now get comfortable, take a slow breath, and let's begin.
When I think back on that relationship, there are moments that feel like turning points, even if they didn't look dramatic from the outside. Not because they were the biggest betrayals or the loudest fights, but because they revealed something I could never unsee after. They showed me, in the clearest way, that he wasn't rooting for me. He wasn't in my corner. He didn't feel joy when I felt joy. He didn't protect the fragile little sparks of confidence I was trying to build. Instead, he seemed almost compelled to crush them the second they showed up. The first moment was something so small and harmless it should have been sweet. I told him I could make balloon animals. It wasn't like I was claiming to be some professional entertainer. It was just a random fact about me. One of those weird little things you learn as a kid to pass the time. It's the kind of thing you mention casually, expecting a laugh or a no way, show me, because it's quirky and kind of cute. It's the kind of thing that should make a partner smile because it's a glimpse into you, into your childhood, into your personality. He didn't believe me. At first, that could have been playful. It could have been a teasing kind of disbelief, like, I need proof. But something about it wasn't playful. It felt like he was calling me a liar, like he couldn't even grant me the basic assumption that I was telling the truth about myself. And I think that's why I felt the need to prove it. I didn't want to be treated like I was making things up for attention. I didn't want to be dismissed. So I bought a small pump and some balloons. And when I got the chance, I made a dog right there in front of him, quickly, like it was nothing. I handed it to him with that little flicker of pride, that small spark of, see, I can do it. And maybe now we can both laugh about it. The second he had it in his hand, he popped it, immediately. No pause, no smile, no okay, that's actually impressive. He just destroyed it. That action was so loud even without words. It said, I don't want you to have this. I don't want you to feel proud. I don't want to be delighted by you. I want to take whatever you just offered and make sure it turns into nothing. And it was such a bizarre, mean choice because it wasn't accidental. It wasn't like it slipped and popped. He chose to pop it. He chose to end the moment by ruining it. The second moment hit even deeper because it wasn't about a silly talent anymore. It was about something you were working so hard for. You were just beginning to learn belly dancing. You described yourself as awkward, and you said elegant will never be a word used to describe you. You mentioned your feet point inward. You were also obese. And the part that stands out so clearly is how brave you were to do it anyway. Because belly dancing isn't only learning movements. It's being in a room full of mirrors. It's being asked to look at your own body over and over again while you try to move it in new ways. It's being asked to be present in your body, not hidden from it. And when you've spent any part of your life feeling self-conscious, that is hard. That's a wall. That's something you climb 1 week at a time. But you were doing it. You were showing up each week. You were working on yourself. And slowly, you were gaining pride and self-esteem. That's not small. That's the kind of progress that should be protected because it's delicate at first. It's like a new plant. It needs care. It needs sunlight. It needs someone who doesn't stomp on it when it's just starting to grow. You finally gathered the courage to show him some of what you had learned. That alone says you wanted connection. You weren't just learning dance for yourself. You wanted your partner to be part of your life, to see you, to be proud of you, to witness you trying. You wanted that moment where you share something new and the person you love looks at you like you're amazing for even trying. It didn't need to be perfect. It didn't need to be elegant. It just needed to be respected. He busted out laughing at you. Not a gentle chuckle because he was nervous. Not a smile that said, "This is cute." He laughed in a way that made you feel like the joke. And laughter like that is brutal because it turns your vulnerability into entertainment. It takes something you were proud of and makes it embarrassing. It tells you very clearly that the person watching you isn't seeing courage or effort. They're seeing something to mock. And that was the moment something broke in you. That makes total sense because those two moments share the same core cruelty. In both, you offered him something that was yours. In the first, it was a harmless, quirky skill. In the second, it was something you were building with effort and courage. In both, he responded by destroying the moment. He didn't just fail to support you. He actively knocked you down. He didn't just stay neutral. He chose harm. That's when you realized he was never in your corner. And once you realize that, you can't unknow it. Because a partner doesn't have to love balloon animals or belly dancing to be kind. They don't have to understand it fully to respect it. They just have to care about you. They just have to want you to feel good. They just have to have that instinct that says, "My partner is trying. My partner is sharing. My partner is being brave, and I'm going to treat that with care." He didn't have that instinct, or he did, and he chose against it. And that's why those moments became so important to you, even if other betrayals happened too. Because those moments weren't complicated. They weren't about misunderstandings. They weren't about two people having different opinions. They were about a simple choice: lift you up or tear you down. He tore you down. Later, there were other knives to the back that killed the relationship. But those were the ones that made you recognize what you want in a true partner. That makes sense too. Because a true partner isn't someone who only shows up when you're already confident. A true partner is someone who is gentle with your new confidence when it's still growing. A true partner is someone who doesn't punish you for being proud of yourself. A true partner doesn't turn your vulnerability into a joke and your joy into something they pop in their hands. What you wanted and what you deserved was someone who could look at your awkwardness and see bravery. Someone who could see you trying and say, "I'm proud of you." Someone who could smile when you offer them a silly balloon dog because it's part of who you are. Someone who could be delighted by you, not threatened by you. Someone who is on your side. And once you know that's what love is supposed to feel like, it becomes impossible to settle for anything less. He accused me of hacking into his email, and it would almost be funny if it didn't feel so disturbing. The whole thing started because I guessed something about him. And I guess I must have been right, because the moment it came out of my mouth, his face changed like I had just confessed to some huge crime. He didn't pause to ask how I would even know that. He didn't stop to think if there was any normal explanation. He went straight to the worst, strangest conclusion: that I must have gotten into his email, that I must have been spying on him, that I was messing with him behind his back. He said it like it was already proven, like the case was closed and all that was left was for me to admit it. The truth was so much less dramatic, and honestly, so much more basic than the story he made up in his head. I didn't know anything because I was looking at his private messages. I put two and two together from things he had said out loud. It wasn't some genius-level detective work either. It was just normal logic. He would tell me one thing one day, forget he said it the next day, and then act shocked when I remembered. He would mention something casually, then later deny he ever mentioned it. Over time, I learned that if I listened carefully and remembered the details, I could usually figure out what was really going on because his stories didn't match up. That's all it was. I was paying attention. I was using my brain. I was noticing patterns. But to him, that couldn't be possible because it meant he wasn't as in control of the narrative as he wanted to be. What made it even more exhausting was how often he forgot his own words. He would say something with complete confidence and then later claim he never said it, or he would say he did something and then later insist he didn't. Sometimes I would gently remind him, like, "You literally told me this yesterday," and he would just look at me like I was making it up. Other times he would get defensive right away, like the fact that I remembered made me suspicious. It was like I was living in this constant loop where I had to prove reality over and over again. And the more clearly I remembered, the angrier he became. So when I guessed that one thing, it wasn't some wild shot in the dark. It was the most obvious conclusion based on information he had already given me. But he didn't see it that way. To him, there were only two options. Either he had messed up and said too much, or I had invaded his privacy. And he could not handle the idea that he had messed up, so he chose the other one. He decided I was hacking him, and the most frustrating part was how pointless it was to explain myself. I told him, calmly and clearly, that I don't know how to hack anything. I don't have those skills. I don't even have the interest. I told him I hadn't touched his email, hadn't accessed anything, hadn't done anything remotely like that. I thought, at first, that if I just explained it like a normal person would, he would calm down. I thought logic would work. I thought, at the very least, he would question his own accusation for a second. But it didn't matter. He didn't want the truth. He wanted the version of the story where he was the victim, where someone else was the problem, where he didn't have to face how messy his own behavior was. He was convinced I was messing with him somehow, and once he got locked into that belief, it was like trying to talk to a wall. Every time I denied it, he treated my denial as proof that I was hiding something. Every time I tried to be clear, he acted like clarity was manipulation. It was a trap. There was no way to win, because he had already decided the answer before he asked the question. I remember thinking, at one point, that the smartest thing he could do for his own sanity would be to actually investigate it. Not because I had anything to hide, but because the reality would calm him down. If he truly believed his email had been hacked, why not check the login history? Why not change his password? Why not use two-factor authentication? Why not do the normal steps any person would do if they believed their account had been compromised? If he did that, he would see it wasn't hacked. He would see there wasn't some shadowy person inside his inbox. He would see the evidence didn't exist. It would be better for him, even from a selfish point of view, because he would stop spinning in his own paranoia. But he didn't do that. He didn't want to see that it wasn't hacked, because that would ruin the story he was telling himself. It would mean he was wrong. It would mean he accused me of something awful for no reason. It would mean he had to look at his own behavior and admit he had created a problem out of nothing. He'd rather stay convinced of something unreal than face the discomfort of being wrong. That's when it hit me how unhealthy the whole dynamic was. It wasn't just about an email account. It was about control and blame. and the way he handled reality. It was about the way he took normal situations and turned them into dramatic accusations. It was about how he reacted to anything that challenged his version of events. If I remembered something he didn't want remembered, I was twisting things. If I connected dots he didn't want connected, I was spying. If I asked a simple question, I was attacking. Everything had to be framed in a way that made him feel powerful and justified, even if it meant making me into some villain. And the accusation itself was insulting in a way that's hard to explain unless you've been through something like that. Being accused of hacking someone's email isn't just a random insult. It's being accused of being sneaky, dishonest, obsessive, and untrustworthy. It's being treated like you're capable of violating someone's privacy and doing something illegal. It's not a small thing. It's a serious accusation. And he threw it at me like it was nothing, like he had a right to believe whatever he wanted about me, regardless of the truth. I think that's part of why it stuck with me. It wasn't just what he said, it was how easily he said it, how quickly he turned to suspicion, how comfortable he was accusing me of something I never did. It showed me that in his mind, my character didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. The reality didn't matter. What mattered was whatever story made him feel like he was in control. And after that, I didn't fight to be understood anymore. I didn't try to convince him. I didn't try to prove my innocence. I didn't try to do the emotional labor of calming him down. I was tired of living in a world where I had to defend myself against imaginary crimes. I was tired of being treated like I was guilty simply because he couldn't handle his own thoughts. Eventually, distance became the only thing that felt safe. Not just physical distance, but emotional distance too. I wanted out of the constant tension, out of the constant need to explain, out of the cycle of him accusing and me defending. I wanted my peace back. I wanted my mind to stop replaying conversations and wondering what I could have said differently. I wanted to stop living like any normal moment could suddenly become another argument about something I didn't do. Now, I don't think of him. I don't have anything to do with him. I don't check in on him. I don't keep tabs. I don't keep connections open, just in case. I don't want him in my life in any form. It's not hatred, and it's not some dramatic revenge feeling. It's just clarity. It's knowing that being close to someone like that drains you. It twists your sense of reality. It makes you second-guess simple things. It forces you into a role where you're constantly trying to prove you're a decent person when you never should have had to prove that at all. Sometimes I wonder if he ever looks back and realizes how out of line he was. Sometimes I wonder if he ever does the logical thing and checks his own account and sees that nothing happened. I doubt it, but a small part of me still thinks it would be good for him, for his own sanity, or whatever is left of it, to face the truth. Not because I need him to admit he was wrong, and not because I need an apology. I don't. I'm long past needing anything from him, but because living in that kind of paranoia has to be exhausting, and I can't imagine how someone can live peacefully when they're always convinced people are out to get them. At the same time, I remind myself that his sanity is not my responsibility. It never was. I spent too much time in that relationship, or that situation, or whatever you want to call it, carrying weight that wasn't mine. I spent too much time trying to be the reasonable one, trying to keep things calm, trying to explain reality like it was a lesson. I don't do that anymore. I don't chase people who choose to believe lies about me. I don't beg to be seen clearly by someone who benefits from seeing me as the problem. What I do now is keep my distance and protect my peace. I live my life without that constant suspicion hanging in the air. I don't miss the stress. And I don't miss the weird feeling of being watched or judged for basic human behavior. I don't miss the way he could take something simple and turn it into something ugly. I don't miss the feeling of trying to speak carefully, like every word could be used against me later. And honestly, the fact that I can say that so clearly now is proof of how far away I am from it. I'm not tangled in it anymore. I'm not waiting for him to change his mind. I'm not hoping he'll finally understand. I'm not planning what I would say if he ever reached out. There is no reaching out. There is no second chance. There is just the quiet relief of knowing I'm not in that mess anymore. If there's one thing I learned from that accusation, it's that some people will always find a way to accuse you of something when they don't want to face themselves. If you're paying attention, you're spying. If you remember, you're keeping score. If you notice patterns, you're obsessed. If you call out contradictions, you're attacking. It's not about you. It's about them needing you to be wrong so they can stay comfortable. So no, I didn't hack his email. I didn't mess with him. I didn't do anything except listen to what he said and use common sense. And I won't carry his paranoia with me. I won't keep defending myself to someone who already decided what to believe. I won't shrink my intelligence or pretend I didn't notice things just to make someone else feel better. I'm done. I'm gone. And I plan to stay that way. When I brought up some of his behavior that had been making me upset, I wasn't trying to start a fight. I wasn't trying to trap him or prove a point or win anything. I was trying to do what people always say you should do in a relationship. Speak up when something hurts you. At the time, I still believed that if I explained myself clearly, he would understand. I thought if I used the right words or the right tone, he would finally see what I was feeling and care enough to change even a little. It started in a normal way, like a lot of our arguments did. Something small had been bothering me for a while, and I had been holding it in because I didn't want drama. I didn't want the mood to turn cold. I didn't want to get annoyed and make me feel like I was being too much. But eventually it reached that point where keeping it inside felt worse than the risk of bringing it up. I remember feeling that familiar tightness in my chest, like my body already knew what was coming. I remember thinking, just say it calm, say it simple, don't accuse him, just explain how you feel. I was careful, the way you get careful around someone who has a short fuse. I told him that certain things he did made me feel disrespected and hurt. I didn't even come at him hard. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't calling him names. I wasn't listing every mistake he had ever made. I was just trying to talk about one or two things, hoping it would be a real conversation. But the moment I said it, I could feel him shift. His face changed, his voice changed, and it was like the whole room changed with him. It was that feeling like the air gets heavier, like you suddenly have to watch every second of the interaction. He didn't ask questions. He didn't say, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize that bothered you." He didn't even say, "Can you explain what you mean?" Instead, he got defensive right away, like my feelings were an attack. He started turning everything back on me. He started acting like I was being unfair. He started picking apart the details and twisting the story until it didn't even sound like what I meant anymore. It was that same routine I had already seen so many times, where I would try to talk about something that hurt me, and he would treat it like a courtroom. I tried to stay calm. I tried to keep my voice steady. I tried to repeat myself and bring it back to the main point. Because I could feel the conversation drifting into nonsense. But he didn't want to stay on the main point. He wanted to win. He wanted to be right. He wanted me to back down. to feel embarrassed for even bringing it up, to feel like I was lucky he tolerated me at all. Then he said it. "I don't know how anyone could ever love someone like you." He said it in a way that made it feel like a statement of fact, not something he just blurted out in anger. He didn't sound shocked at himself. He didn't sound like he regretted it the moment it left his mouth. He said it like he had been holding it in, like he had been waiting for the chance to throw it at me. And the moment he said it, I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I remember the immediate feeling, like my whole body went cold. There are certain words that hit you so hard that you don't even know what to say back. It was like my brain couldn't process it fast enough. I remember staring at him and feeling this strange mix of hurt and disbelief. How can someone say that to you? How can someone look at you? Someone who claims to care about you and aims straight for the deepest fear most people have, that they are unlovable? I didn't even know how to respond. A part of me wanted to cry. A part of me wanted to scream. A part of me wanted to get up, walk out, and never come back. But instead, I froze. I tried to stay composed because I had already learned that if I showed too much emotion, he would use it against me. If I cried, he would call me dramatic. If I got angry, he would call me crazy. If I tried to defend myself, he would twist my words until I sounded guilty for having feelings in the first place. That sentence wasn't just mean. It was designed to break me. It was designed to make me doubt myself. It was designed to make me feel small and desperate, like I had to earn love by becoming easier, quieter, more obedient. It was like he wanted to put me in a position where I would think, maybe I really am hard to love. Maybe I should just be grateful he's here at all. And I hate that it worked, even for a moment. I hate that when you're young, when you don't fully know your own worth yet, words like that can sink in and start living in your head. The saddest part is that I didn't leave that day. I didn't pack my things and walk out. I didn't immediately draw a hard line and say, no one who loves me would ever say that to me. I stayed with him for another year. When I look back now, it's hard not to judge myself. It's hard not to think, what were you doing? Why did you stay? Why didn't you see it? But I also understand now that when you're in something like that, your sense of normal gets slowly warped. It doesn't usually start with a sentence like that. It starts with smaller moments that you brush off. It starts with little put-downs that you excuse because you don't want to be too sensitive. It starts with the way they pull back affection when you don't behave the way they want. It starts with the way they make you feel like conflict is your fault, even when you are simply asking for basic respect. By the time he said that sentence, I was already trained in a way. I was already used to swallowing my feelings to keep the peace. I was already used to walking on eggshells. I was already used to questioning whether I was being unreasonable. And I was still young enough to think love meant enduring. I thought staying proved something. I thought if I could just be better, he would finally treat me better. I also think I believed his good moments meant something. He wasn't cruel every second of every day. There were times when he could be charming. There were times when he could be sweet in a shallow way. There were times when he would act like he cared, especially if he thought he was about to lose me. Those moments kept me hooked because I would tell myself, see, this is the real him. The mean part is just stress. The mean part is just anger. The mean part is just a bad day. I kept hoping the good version of him would win. But looking back, I can see that the good moments were never about truly liking me. They were about keeping me. They were about control. That's the part that is so clear now. He didn't actually like me. He didn't enjoy who I was. He didn't admire me. He didn't feel lucky to have me. He didn't see me as a whole person with thoughts and feelings that deserved care. He wanted someone to control. He wanted someone he could shape. Someone he could keep slightly off balance so he always had the upper hand. Someone who would doubt herself enough that she would keep trying harder and harder while he gave less and less. Control can look normal at first. It doesn't always show up as obvious rules like you can't wear that or you can't go there. Sometimes it looks like a comment here and there that makes you second guess yourself. Sometimes it looks like sarcasm when you're excited about something. Sometimes it looks like making you feel guilty when you spend time with friends. Sometimes it looks like making you feel like your feelings are a burden. Sometimes it looks like reacting with anger every time you ask for something healthy, like honesty or effort or kindness. Over time, you start shrinking. You start editing yourself before you speak. You start noticing that you don't laugh as loud, you don't share as much, you don't take up as much space. You start trying to be easy. You start trying to be the version of yourself that causes the least trouble. And then you look up one day and realize you've been living in a smaller and smaller box. And the person who built the box is standing there acting like you should be grateful for it. That sentence he said during that argument became one of those things that replayed in my mind, even after the argument ended. Sometimes it came back when I tried to talk about something important. Sometimes it came back when I made a simple mistake. Sometimes it came back when I felt insecure. It wasn't just a sentence, it was a seed he planted, and he knew it would grow if he watered it with enough criticism and enough coldness. The year after that argument, I changed in ways I didn't notice at first. I became more quiet. I became more careful. I became more anxious about saying the wrong thing. I started apologizing too much. I started over-explaining my feelings. I started trying to predict his reactions so I could avoid them. I started thinking about what I could do to make him nicer, as if his cruelty was a problem I could solve with the right behavior. And every time I tried to bring up something that hurt me, it would lead back to the same cycle. He would get defensive. He would twist it. He would make me feel like I was asking for too much. Sometimes he would punish me with silence. Sometimes he would treat me with sarcasm and make it seem like I was embarrassing for caring. Sometimes he would suddenly be sweet again, not because he was truly sorry, but because he could sense I was pulling away. Now, when I look back, I can see that my young and dumb wasn't actually dumb in the way people mean it. It wasn't that I had no intelligence. It was that I didn't have enough experience to recognize emotional cruelty for what it was. I didn't have enough life behind me to understand that love does not feel like being threatened. Love does not feel like being insulted when you speak up. Love does not feel like you're constantly proving your worth. Love does not make you feel like nobody else could ever want you. I wish I could go back and tell that younger version of me something simple. I would tell her that people who like you don't try to destroy your confidence. People who like you don't use your biggest fears as weapons. People who like you don't talk to you like you're a problem to be tolerated. And I would tell her that even if you were imperfect, even if you were emotional, even if you were learning, you still deserved basic kindness. You still deserved to be spoken to with respect. You still deserved a partner who cared about your feelings. Because that's the thing. When someone says, "I don't know how anyone could ever love someone like you," they aren't giving honest feedback. They aren't describing a real problem you need to fix. They're trying to cut you down so you won't leave. They're trying to make you feel like your options are limited. They're trying to make themselves the prize, even while they treat you badly. It's a form of emotional control, and it works best on people who are young, hopeful, and still figuring out what healthy love should look like. The irony is, there are so many people in the world who can love someone like me. There are friends who love me. There are family members who love me. There are kind strangers who treat me with more respect than he did. There are future partners who would have loved me in a way that didn't require me to shrink. His sentence wasn't truth. It was a tactic. It was his way of trying to lock me into the relationship by making me feel like leaving would mean being alone forever. But I'm not stuck in that mindset anymore. Time gives you clarity, and distance makes the fog lift. When you're finally out of a relationship like that, you start remembering who you were before you started bending yourself into smaller shapes. You start noticing what peace feels like. You start realizing how much energy you spent trying to manage someone else's mood. You start recognizing how abnormal it is to be scared of a conversation, and you start seeing the pattern for what it is. Not love, not passion, not just a rough patch, but a person who needed control more than they wanted connection. I stayed for another year after he said it, and I won't lie, sometimes that fact still stings. Sometimes I still feel embarrassed that I didn't choose myself sooner. But I also know that leaving is not always one dramatic moment. Sometimes leaving is a slow awakening. Sometimes it takes time for your heart to accept what your mind is starting to see. Sometimes it takes repeated pain before the truth finally settles in. This person doesn't like me. This person doesn't respect me. This person doesn't want to love me in a healthy way. And once you realize that, you can't unsee it. Now, when I think about that argument, I don't just think about the sentence. I think about what it revealed. It revealed his mindset. It revealed his goal in conflict. It revealed that when he was challenged, he didn't try to understand. He tried to hurt. It revealed that he wanted power, not partnership. And it revealed that the love I was trying to earn was never something he planned to give freely, because what he wanted was someone who would accept less and call it love. I was young, and I stayed longer than I should have, but I learned something important from it. I learned that real love doesn't need cruelty to hold it together. Real love doesn't need threats. Real love doesn't try to make you feel unlovable. Real love makes space for your feelings, even when it's uncomfortable. Real love can hear, "This hurt me," without turning it into war. And real love, the kind that's actually worth having, starts with a person who genuinely likes you, not a person who sees you as something to control. That's what I understand now, looking back. He never actually liked me. He just wanted someone to control. And once I could finally say that out loud, the spell broke. In the very beginning, he wasn't just some random guy I met online or someone who appeared out of nowhere. He was already in my world. He was in my friend's circle, one of those people you'd see at gatherings, birthdays, small group hangouts, and casual nights where everyone knew everyone. Because of that, he already felt safe, in a way. He wasn't a stranger. Other people knew him. People smiled when he walked in. They spoke to him like he belonged. And I had always kind of liked him from a distance, not in a serious, intense way, but in that quiet way where you notice someone and you think he seems different from the others. He seemed thoughtful. He seemed kind. When other people were loud or attention-seeking, he came off calmer. He would ask questions instead of dominating the room. He'd do little things that made him seem considerate, like remembering details people shared or offering help without making a big show of it. I didn't know him deeply, and I didn't really spend time with him one-on-one, but every time I saw him around our group, he had this image of being a decent person. So when we started dating, it felt like it made sense. It didn't feel wild or reckless. It felt like a natural shift, like something that had been sitting in the background for a while and finally moved forward. I told myself that this was probably better than dating some stranger, because at least I had seen him in social settings. At least I had watched how he treated other people. At least he seemed stable and good-hearted. I wasn't rushing into anything either. We were still getting to know each other, still learning how we fit, still building that early foundation where everything is new and you're excited, but also cautious. In the first weeks, I was trying to take it slow. I wasn't imagining marriage. I wasn't planning my future around him. I was just enjoying the idea that someone I already liked as a person was showing interest in me, and I wanted to see where it went. But it didn't take long for things to start feeling off. At first, it was small. It wasn't like he suddenly turned into a totally different person overnight. It was more like little moments where I'd leave a conversation with him and feel slightly confused. Like I couldn't fully explain why I didn't feel good. There were comments that seemed harmless on the surface, but made me feel like I had to prove myself. There were little shifts in his tone where he'd act sweet one minute and then slightly cold the next. There were times I'd set a small boundary, like saying no to something, and I'd feel this subtle pressure afterward, like he wanted to punish me without outright saying he was punishing me. The thing that made it tricky is that he could still look like the nice, thoughtful guy in front of others. Around the group, he kept the same image. He'd still laugh at the right moments, still seem calm, still seem reasonable. But when it was just me and him, I started feeling like there was something under the surface that wasn't kind. It was like he was always watching me for reactions, like he enjoyed being able to influence how I felt, like he wanted Ned to see how far he could push without me calling it out. I'm careful about labels, because I know the internet loves to diagnose people. I'm not a professional, and I'm not trying to pretend I can identify someone with a disorder just from dating them. But I will say this, the more I learned, the more I read, and the more I compared his behavior to the patterns people describe when they talk about someone being a narcissist, the more I felt this sick recognition. Not because I wanted to put him in a box, but because it explained the exact kind of emotional unease I kept feeling. The controlling vibe, the way he twisted things, the way he seemed to enjoy power in subtle ways, the way he acted like he was above it all, like other people's feelings, were cute little things he could play with. It wasn't 2 years into the relationship where this started showing. It was early. That's what still stands out to me. It was early enough that we were still in that stage where most people are on their best behavior. Early enough that there wasn't even deep history to hide behind. Early enough that we hadn't said, "I love you." We were only about 2 months in. 2 months is not long. 2 months is still the beginning. You're still learning their habits. You're still figuring out what kind of communicator they are. You're still building trust. You're still in the phase where the relationship is supposed to feel lighter, more hopeful, more exciting, because it hasn't been weighed down by years of resentment or repeated betrayals. And during that time, he looked me in the eyes and said something I will never forget. He said with a smirk, "You would be so happy if I told you I love you, wouldn't you?" It wasn't said softly. It wasn't said with warmth. It wasn't said like he was nervous or sweet, like he was building up to a genuine emotional moment. It was said like he was testing me, like he was dangling something in front of me to see how badly I wanted it, like he was holding a treat just out of reach and enjoying the fact that he had the power to give it or withhold it. The smirk is what burned it into my memory. That little expression that said, "I know what you want, and I like that you want it." The moment he said it, I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't flattering. It didn't make me feel wanted. It made me feel exposed. Like he was looking at me as a simple, predictable person with a simple, predictable desire, and he was entertained by it. It was like he was saying, "I could make you happy right now if I wanted to, but I'm not going to, because I'm enjoying this position I'm in." I remember trying to respond in a way that didn't give him the satisfaction he seemed to be looking for. I didn't want to look eager. I didn't want to look desperate. I didn't want to hand him proof that he had control over my emotions. But it was hard, because the comment itself forced me into a weird corner. If I said, "Yes, I would," it would feel like I was admitting something he could use. If I said, "No, I wouldn't," it would feel like I was lying, or at least trying too hard to look tough. Either way, he had already done what he wanted to do, which was shake the ground under me a little and see how I reacted. It was such a strange moment, because it was so clearly not about love. Love wasn't even the point. The point was the idea of love as a tool. He was treating those words like a prize he could give me, like a button he could push to control my mood. He wasn't asking how I felt about him. He wasn't saying he was developing feelings. He wasn't sharing anything vulnerable about himself. He was simply pointing out that I would be happy if he gave me something emotional, and he seemed amused by it. And that's when something in me clicked. Not fully, not in a way where I instantly walked away that same day, but enough that I felt the warning. Enough that I knew this wasn't a normal thing to say in a healthy relationship. Enough that I could sense he didn't see emotional connection the way I did. After that, things started to feel weirder and weirder. It wasn't like that one comment was the only problem. It was more like that comment was the first time he showed his hand so clearly that I couldn't pretend I was imagining things. And once I had that moment, it was harder to ignore the other moments too. The little manipulations became easier to spot. The way he shifted blame, the way he talked like he was always one step above everyone else, the way he could say something that sounded innocent but carried an edge underneath it, the way he seemed to enjoy me being uncertain. I started noticing how he reacted when I had my own opinions. I started noticing how he responded when I didn't immediately agree with him. I started noticing the way he would pull back warmth if I didn't behave the way he wanted. It wasn't always direct. Sometimes it was just a change in tone, a quiet punishment, a moment where he made me feel like I had done something wrong without actually saying what. And because it was still early, I kept trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. I kept thinking maybe he's just awkward. Maybe he has a strange sense of humor. Maybe he's trying to act confident. Maybe he's been hurt in the past and he doesn't know how to be sincere. But deep down, I didn't feel safe with him, not physically, not in the sense of danger, but emotionally. I didn't feel like I could relax into being myself. I didn't feel like I could be soft without him taking advantage of it. I didn't feel like I could be honest without him using it later. It was like being around someone who was always slightly performing, always slightly calculating, always watching for leverage. And because he was in my friend circle, that made it even more confusing. I kept thinking, how can someone seem so normal around everyone else and still make me feel this uneasy when it's just us? Then I started realizing that it might actually be part of the pattern. Around other people, he could keep the mask. Around me, where he had more access, he could experiment with control. It took about 1 more month for me to end it. So overall, it was around 3 months of dating. Not long at all, but long enough to leave a mark. Long enough for me to question myself. Long enough for his voice to get into my head a little. long enough for me to look back and feel both relieved that I left early and angry that I ever doubted my instincts. The breakup wasn't dramatic like some movie scene. It wasn't me screaming and throwing things. It was more like I reached a point where I couldn't keep explaining away what I was seeing. The weirdness wasn't just one awkward comment anymore. It was a growing pattern, and I could feel myself starting to adapt to it, starting to think too much about how to say things, starting to wonder how to keep him calm, starting to anticipate his moods. That scared me, because I knew that once you start doing that, it only gets worse. The longer you stay, the more normal it feels. The more you forget what it's like to just exist in a relationship without walking on eggshells. So I ended it. I chose myself even though I knew it would be awkward because of the friend group, even though I knew I might have to see him again at gatherings, even though I knew people might have opinions, even though I knew he might try to make me look like I was overreacting. I did it anyway, because the peace of being away from him felt more important than the discomfort of the social fallout. And still, even after I broke up with him, that sentence stayed with me. You would be so happy if I told you I love you, wouldn't you? It wasn't just creepy. It was revealing. It showed me how he saw emotions, how he saw closeness, how he saw love. Not as something shared between two people, but as something he could use to control someone else. It was the smirk that made it worse, because it showed he wasn't saying it with innocence. He was enjoying the idea that he could push a button in me, that he could influence my heart with a few words. I've thought about it a lot since then, not because I miss him, but because it taught me something. It taught me how quickly someone can flip a situation and make you feel like the one who wants too much when really you're just wanting something normal. It taught me that early red flags matter, especially when they show up while someone is still supposed to be trying to impress you. It taught me that when someone seems entertained by your feelings, that is not romance. That is not affection. That is not flirting in a healthy way. That is someone testing how easy you are to manipulate. I think what bothered me most is how clearly he knew the power of those words. He knew that I love you can make someone feel secure, chosen, cared for. He knew that it can deepen a bond. He knew it can create trust. And instead of treating it with care, he treated it like a toy. He treated it like something he could hold over me. He treated it like a reward he could give if I played my part correctly. Even though we hadn't said, "I love you," yet, the way he said that showed me he was already thinking about control. He wasn't thinking about building something mutual. He wasn't thinking about being close in a real way. He was thinking about what would make me react, what would make me lean in, what would make me want him more. He wanted the advantage. He wanted to feel like he could make me feel a certain way whenever he wanted. And maybe the strangest part is that if you told someone the sentence on paper, they might not even get it right away. Some people might read it and think it's just teasing, like maybe he was joking. But I know how it felt in the moment. I know the tone. I know the look in his eyes. I know the smirk. I know the way my body reacted before my mind could even explain it. That moment wasn't loving. It wasn't playful. It was like he was showing me that he understood emotional influence, and he liked having it. I'm grateful I got out when I did. I'm grateful I listened to the part of me that felt uneasy, instead of trying to force myself to be cool about it. I'm grateful that even though he was in my friend group and seemed kind on the surface, I didn't keep dating him just because it would have been convenient, or because I didn't want things to be awkward. I'm grateful I trusted my instincts when they kept whispering that something was wrong. Because looking back, I don't think it would have improved. People like that don't usually become more sincere with time. They don't usually become less manipulative once you're attached. If anything, the more attached you get, the easier it is for them to play games. The more you care, the more leverage they have. The more you invest, the harder it is to leave. And he was already smirking at the idea of how happy he could make me with a few words, only 2 months in. That tells me everything I need to know about the direction it was going. So yes, it was only a short relationship, and I ended it quickly, but that sentence is one I'll never forget. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was so clear. It was a glimpse behind the mask. It was a moment where he wasn't pretending to be thoughtful and kind. It was a moment where he was honest about enjoying power, even if he didn't say it directly. And that's why it stuck, because it wasn't just a weird line. It was the first time I saw exactly what he wanted from me, and it wasn't love, it was control. He love-bombed me hard at the start. The kind of intense affection that feels flattering at first, and then starts to feel like pressure once you realize it has an agenda behind it. In the beginning, he was pouring attention all over me, making big plans, talking like we were already building a life together. It wasn't just sweet messages and frequent hangouts. It was him trying to speed-run intimacy. He pushed the relationship forward like it was a race. Like if we moved fast enough, I wouldn't have time to notice anything off. I actually had to curb his attempts to push things faster, which should have been my first sign. A healthy person doesn't need you to constantly tap the brakes just so you can breathe. A healthy person doesn't treat your reasonable pace like an obstacle. Looking back, I can admit I should have ended things way earlier. Specifically when we had our first tense conversation that escalated into an argument. It wasn't even the topic that mattered as much as how he acted once things weren't perfectly smooth. That's where the real person shows up. Anyone can be charming when it's easy. The real test is what they do when you disagree, when you have a point, when you don't just nod along. That first argument showed me exactly how he handled conflict, and it was a preview of everything that came after. It started because I was trying to make my point, and he kept interrupting me. Not once, several times. I don't mean little accidental interruptions either, like someone excitedly jumping in. I mean that steady, dismissive kind where you feel like you're fighting for the right to finish a sentence. I tried to stay calm, but after being cut off repeatedly, I did what most people would do. I defended my point. I held my ground, and instead of hearing me, he acted like I was attacking him. He got in that mindset where your disagreement becomes disrespect, and your boundaries become aggression. He started getting rude, and he refused to back down from being angry. It was like he needed to stay angry to feel in control. Like calming down would mean he had to admit he was wrong for interrupting me. At that point, I was trying to figure out how to de-escalate it. I wasn't trying to win. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. I wanted the conversation to come back down to normal. I wanted us to find the ramp back toward resolution. I could feel myself getting worked up, and I didn't want it to spiral. So I took a breath and tried to soften. I tried to get him to engage in chilling out. I was thinking, okay, we can reset, we can slow down, we can talk like adults. Nope, he refused to engage. He didn't meet me halfway. He didn't take the off-ramp. He chose the cliff instead. He shut me out angrily, like he was punishing me for not just accepting his behavior. And I remember being genuinely surprised and confused, because I had never seen someone so committed to staying mad when an opening for peace was right there. It wasn't that he couldn't calm down. It was that he didn't want to. There's a difference between someone who is overwhelmed and needs a break and someone who uses withdrawal and coldness as a weapon. What he did felt like a weapon. It felt like, if you don't submit, I will freeze you out. The argument happened late at night at his home. We had planned to have a whole weekend together, and the plan was supposed to be cozy and intimate and normal. Instead, I was sitting there, tired and emotionally spent, feeling like I had just had to negotiate for basic respect. I couldn't fathom laying in bed with him after that. I couldn't imagine crawling under the covers next to someone who had been cold and rude and openly unwilling to resolve anything. My body was telling me no, get out of here, because safety isn't just physical. Emotional safety matters too. And in that moment, I didn't feel emotionally safe with him at all. So I decided to call a cab and go back home. That's when he said something that should ended it right there. As I was leaving, he told me, "You can take all your stuff with you. Leave my key." He said it like he could just snap his fingers and discard me. Like I was a guest who overstayed. Like my presence in his life was something he could revoke on the spot because I didn't behave the way he wanted. And what made it so wild is that this was the same man who, for 3 months, had been pouring affection all over me. 3 months of intensity, 3 months of rushing, 3 months of acting like we were building something serious. He was trying to get me a position at his job. He was asking me to move in. He was acting like we were already intertwined. And then, in one tense moment, he was willing to cut it all off with a few sharp words, not because he was heartbroken, but because he was angry that I didn't accept his behavior. That's what love bombing often is. It isn't deep love. It's control dressed up as devotion. It's like they're trying to wrap you in a warm blanket so tight you can't move, and the second you resist, the blanket turns into a rope. And yet, regrettably, we stayed together a whole year. That's the part I still hate admitting, because when I look back, it's obvious what I was dealing with. But when you're inside it, it's never that simple. You start second-guessing yourself. You start thinking maybe you overreacted. You start remembering the sweet version of them, the one who looked at you like you were the best thing that ever happened to them. You start believing that version could come back if you just communicate better. Stay calmer. Choose your words carefully. Don't trigger them. Don't push too hard. Don't ask at the wrong time. And slowly, without even realizing it, you're doing the emotional work for 2 people. Over that year, there were several other instances of his self-centeredness and his lack of reciprocity for the many things I did for him. It wasn't just conflict. It was the imbalance. It was the way I showed up, and he treated it like it was expected. It was the way he took and took and took, but didn't naturally give back unless it benefited his image or his comfort. It was the way he could be generous when it was exciting, when it made him feel like a hero, and then suddenly stingy with effort when I needed something real. It was like he loved the performance of being a good partner, but not the actual responsibility of being one. Then came the last big argument, the final one. By then, I was exhausted. I had defended myself so many times while he did his classic thing, interrupting, controlling the conversation, forcing me to fight for space. This time, I didn't respond like my best self. I'm not proud of it. But I was done playing nice while he bulldozed. So when he kept interrupting, I started interrupting him back, partly out of anger, partly to show him what it felt like, and honestly, partly just to be petty. I had hit that point where you know you're not being your best, but you're so tired of being the only one trying to be mature that something snaps. He became furious, not just annoyed, furious. He started cursing at me, saying disrespectful shit, acting like my behavior was some outrageous crime, even though he'd been doing that exact thing to me. That was another pattern. When he does something, it's normal. When you do it back, it's unacceptable. He could dish it out constantly, but the second he got a taste of it, he lost his mind. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't interested in fairness. He was interested in dominance. And in that moment, I made a decision I wish I had made months earlier. I left. I left some of my stuff at his place and never reached out. I didn't send a long paragraph explaining my feelings. I didn't try to have a closure talk. I didn't ask him to understand. I didn't negotiate. I didn't beg. I didn't give him more access to me. I just left. I chose silence and distance because by then I knew he wasn't a person you could reason with. He was a person who wanted to win, and if you stay in the conversation long enough, he will twist you into a villain no matter what you do. And then he said one of his final bitch-ass lines, the kind of line that's meant to flip reality upside down. I feel unsafe. He said that as I was literally putting on my clothes to leave his apartment. That part still blows my mind when I think about it because it was so manipulative. It was such an obvious attempt to rewrite what was happening in real time. I was the one leaving. I wasn't threatening him. I wasn't screaming in his face. I wasn't breaking things. I wasn't blocking his door. I was putting on my clothes and leaving. And he tried to label himself as the unsafe one, as if my refusal to stay and take his disrespect was somehow dangerous to him. Some people use that word like a shield, not because they are truly afraid, but because it instantly makes them look like the victim. It makes you look like the aggressor, even if you're doing the most harmless thing possible. It's a way to end the conversation with moral superiority. It's a way to leave you confused and questioning yourself. It's a way to make you defend your character when you should be focused on your own boundaries. But by that point, I was done being confused. Because when I look at the whole story from start to finish, it's clear. The love bombing wasn't love. It was pressure. His anger wasn't passion. It was entitlement. His cold shutdowns weren't him being overwhelmed. They were punishments. His constant interruptions weren't him being excited. They were him controlling the space. His threat to end things over a conflict wasn't him having standards. It was him testing whether I would beg. And his last, I feel unsafe, wasn't a genuine expression of fear. It was him trying to steal the victim role one last time as I walked out. The scariest part is how quickly it all happened. 3 months in, he was already showing these patterns. That early argument should have been the end, because it wasn't a minor slip. It was a clear demonstration of how he handled power and conflict. And that's what people like that do. They come on strong. They rush intimacy. They make you feel chosen and special. And then, the moment you show a spine, they punish you for it. They make the relationship feel like it can be taken away at any time, which keeps you anxious and trying harder. That's why it's so hard to leave. Because you spend so much time trying to get back to the early sweetness, not realizing the sweetness was part of the trap. I'm not going to pretend I'm proud of every moment in that year because I wasn't perfect. I got reactive. I got petty at the end. I stayed longer than I should have. But none of that changes the truth. He was not a safe partner. He was not a fair partner. He was not someone who valued resolution. He valued control. And once you see that clearly, the only real win is leaving, because staying only teaches them that their behavior works. The fact that you walked out and never reached out again says something strong about you. It says you reached your limit and you finally protected yourself. It says you stopped negotiating with someone who didn't want peace. And even if you left some of your stuff behind, you kept the most important thing, your freedom, your self-respect, and your future. Because someone who truly loves you doesn't love bomb you into a corner. They don't punish you for disagreeing. They don't interrupt you into silence. They don't shut you out with anger when you try to de-escalate. They don't threaten to end things to regain control. They don't curse at you for mirroring what they do. And they sure as hell don't call themselves unfake when you're simply trying to leave their apartment with your dignity intact.
Quick pause, then we're right back. A lot of people watch one story and leave, but some stick around. They hit subscribe and come back every night. If you want to be one of them, the button's right there. Turn on the bell too, so you never miss a new one. That's it. Let's get back to the story.
When I got something that was, at the time, my dream job, I did what felt natural to me. I reached for the people I loved most. I called my mom first because I knew she would understand what it took for me to get there. All the effort, the stress, the waiting, the hoping. Then I called my best friend because she had been with me through the whole process, cheering me on, listening to me talk myself in and out of confidence, reminding me of my worth when I was scared I wasn't enough. And then, after those 2 calls, I called my boyfriend because that's what you're supposed to do, right? If you're building a life with someone, they're one of the first people you want to share your wins with. They're part of your world. They're supposed to be proud of you. They're supposed to want good things for you the way you want good things for them. The first 2 calls were exactly what I expected. My mom was ecstatic. She sounded like her whole face was smiling, like she was standing up while she talked, like she couldn't believe it, and also totally could believe it because she knew me. She told me she was proud. She said all the right things. She made me feel like this moment mattered because it did. My best friend was the same. She practically squealed. She asked me a million questions in that excited way, like she wanted to live inside the moment with me. She congratulated me like it was her own win too, because that's what real friends do. They don't treat your success like it threatens them. They don't measure your good news against their ego. They let you have your moment and they add to it. After those 2 calls, I felt warm and grounded. I felt like I was standing in the light. I felt proud of myself in a way I hadn't in a long time. Then I called my boyfriend. I still remember the shift. It was like the energy just dropped. I told him, expecting at least a little enthusiasm, expecting something like "that's amazing," or "I knew you could do it," or even just "I'm happy for you," something, anything. But he had no response. Not in the stunned processing way where you can tell someone is surprised and then happiness will hit them. It was more like emptiness, like I had offered him a gift and he didn't want to hold it. Like he couldn't find it in himself to mirror my joy. It wasn't even that he said something rude right away. It was the lack of basic warmth, the flatness, the silence that sat there too long, the feeling that I was suddenly talking to someone who didn't care. At first, I tried to make excuses. I thought maybe he was tired. Maybe he was distracted. Maybe he didn't understand how big this was for me. I repeated it, or I explained it more, like sometimes we do when we're trying to get the other person to catch up emotionally. I filled in details. I tried to give him something to react to, but it still didn't come. And the more I talked, the more I felt this weird embarrassment creeping in, like I was performing my own happiness in front of someone who resented it. That moment should have told me everything. A partner who loves you doesn't go silent when you share a dream coming true. They don't act like your success is inconvenient. They don't respond like your joy is something they need to tolerate. Even if they're having a hard time, Even if they're struggling in their own life, a decent partner can still say, "I'm proud of you," and mean it. They can still understand that your win is not a personal attack on them. But my boyfriend couldn't do that. He either didn't want to, or he wasn't capable of it. And either way, the result was the same. I felt alone in a moment where I should have felt supported, and it didn't stop there. From then on, he was bitter about my employment. Bitter in a way that wasn't always loud, but was always present. It was like a stain that spread into other conversations. If I talked about work, he'd make comments that drained the excitement out of it. If I was tired from a long day, instead of comforting me, he'd act like my job was the reason I wasn't giving him whatever attention he wanted. If I was proud of myself, he'd act like pride was something I didn't have the right to feel. And it wasn't just one moment where he was weird and then got over it. It became a pattern. My job became something he reacted to with resentment instead of respect. Looking back, I can see it for what it was. He liked me better when he felt above me or when he felt like I needed him. He liked me better when my life was smaller. He liked me better when my achievements didn't shine too brightly. When I grew, it threatened him. When I became more stable, it highlighted how unstable he was. When I moved forward, it forced him to look at how stuck he was, and instead of using that discomfort as motivation to improve his own life, he used it as an excuse to punish me emotionally. I had supported him through his issues as much as I could. I had been patient. I had tried to understand his struggles. I had listened to him when he felt low. I had helped him when he didn't have it together. I had offered encouragement in the ways that mattered, not just words, but real support. And for a long time, I believed that if I gave enough, if I showed enough love, it would come back to me. I thought he would eventually realize how lucky he was. I thought he would eventually grow. I thought he would eventually become the kind of partner who could celebrate me. But he didn't. And one of the clearest examples came when we broke up. By the time we reached the end, I was in a very vulnerable place mentally. I wasn't doing well. I had been carrying stress, carrying responsibility, carrying the emotional weight of a relationship where I was often the one holding things up. I needed tenderness. I needed something simple and human. I wasn't asking for expensive gifts or grand gestures. I wasn't asking for him to change who he was overnight. I was asking for some show of affection once in a while, even if it was just a cheap bunch of flowers. Something that said, "I see you, and I care, and I want to make you feel loved." And I said this not for the first time. That's important. It wasn't like I sprung it on him suddenly. I had communicated it before. I had tried different ways. I had tried to make it easy. I had tried to be direct but gentle. I had tried to explain why it mattered. I had tried to tell him that affection isn't just a nice extra. It's part of what keeps a relationship alive. I had tried to tell him that when you feel loved, you can handle the hard stuff better, because at least the foundation feels safe. When I said it again during that breakup conversation, I was hoping for at least some understanding. Even if the relationship was ending, even if we weren't going to stay together, there is still a basic level of decency you expect from someone who claimed to love you. Even if he was angry, even if he was defensive, I still didn't expect what came out of his mouth. He said, "I'll buy you flowers. I hope you choke on them." I can still feel how my body reacted when he said it. It was like something went cold inside me. It wasn't just mean. It was cruel in a way that felt deliberate, like he wanted the words to cut deep and stay there. It took something gentle, something symbolic, something that was supposed to represent care, and turned it into a threat. It was the kind of sentence that reveals the truth about someone, because it shows you what they do when they feel cornered. Some people feel cornered and they get quiet. Some people get emotional. Some people beg. Some people walk away. He chose cruelty, and he chose it like it was a weapon he enjoyed using. In that moment, I realized I wasn't dealing with a partner who simply didn't understand romance, or who didn't know how to show affection. I was dealing with someone who, when asked for something basic, responded with spite. Someone who could look at a simple request and twist it into an opportunity to hurt me. Someone who heard vulnerability and saw a target. What's strange is that part of me was shocked, but another part of me wasn't, because by then, there had already been so many small moments that pointed in this direction. The bitterness about my job, the lack of support, the way he seemed to take from me without returning anything, the way he acted entitled to what I provided, the way he treated my needs like they were annoying. That sentence about the flowers wasn't a random outburst from a loving man having a bad day. It was the purest version of something that had been there all along. Needless to say, we are no longer together. And I can say that now with a kind of calm certainty, because the distance has made everything clearer. At the time, I was dealing with the messy feelings that come with leaving someone you invested in even when you know they're wrong for you. But the truth is, leaving was the only way I could get my life back. There's also a detail that still makes me shake my head when I think about it. Not because it's funny in a light-hearted way, but because it's such a perfect summary of him. He never even bought me the flowers I was meant to choke on. He said it as a line, as a bite, as a way to hurt me, but he couldn't even follow through on being mean in any practical way, because his cruelty was mostly about words and control, not action. He could say something vicious and then go right back to expecting me to carry everything. And that brings me to the part that makes everything even more obvious in hindsight. He was chronically unemployed, and I paid the rent and bills for 3 years. 3 years, around $11,000 worth. When I say it like that, it sounds insane, and it is. But when you're living it, you don't always see it as one huge amount. You see it as small monthly sacrifices. You see it as he's going through something. You see it as he'll get back on his feet. You see it as this is what supportive partners do. You convince yourself you're building a life together, and right now you're carrying more. But later, it will balance out. Except it didn't balance out. He didn't suddenly become grateful and step up. He didn't suddenly start treating me like the reason he had a roof over his head. He didn't suddenly become softer and more affectionate because I was giving so much. In fact, it was like the more I gave, the more he felt entitled to it. The more I supported him, the more he acted like support was what he deserved by default. And meanwhile, he couldn't celebrate my dream job. He couldn't handle me improving my life. He couldn't handle me becoming independent and proud. When I put those pieces together now, it makes sense. My success threatened the dynamic that benefited him. If I was stable, employed, growing, and confident, I was less easy to control. If I had options, I was less likely to tolerate disrespect. If I was building my own future, I was less likely to keep paying for his lack of effort. So instead of being happy for me, he was bitter. Instead of being proud, he was resentful. Instead of supporting me, he tried to drag my joy down to his level so he wouldn't have to face the contrast between our lives. The worst part about being with someone like that is not just the money or the lack of affection or even the cruelty. It's the way it slowly changes you. It makes you question what you deserve. It makes you ask for basic things like they're huge favors. It makes you feel guilty for needing love. It makes you feel like you're being needy when you're actually being normal. It makes you shrink because you learn that anything you ask for might be met with anger or mockery. But then, when you finally get out, you start to feel yourself expand again. You start to realize how much you were holding your breath. You start to notice that peace feels strange at first because you got so used to tension. You start to realize that healthy love doesn't require you to beg for crumbs. Healthy love doesn't punish you for wanting affection. Healthy love doesn't resent your success. Healthy love doesn't turn kindness into a weapon. That's why it matters so much to me to say this clearly. I am in a much healthier and much more supportive relationship now. And the difference is not subtle. It's not like, oh, this person is a little nicer. It's like living in a completely different world. A world where your partner can be happy for you without making it about them. A world where your wins are celebrated instead of resented. A world where you can ask for affection without being mocked. A world where someone can disagree with you without trying to crush you. In my current relationship, I don't have to earn basic care. I don't have to beg for softness. I don't have to fight for space in a conversation. I don't have to carry everything while someone else complains about how heavy it is. I don't have to brace myself when I share good news. I can simply be. I can have joy, and it doesn't get punished. I can have sadness, and it doesn't get dismissed. I can have needs, and they aren't treated like an inconvenience. And what that has taught me is that the problem was never that I asked for too much. The problem was that I was asking the wrong person. I was asking someone who benefited from withholding. Someone who felt powerful when I felt small. Someone who took my support but couldn't offer me the most basic respect. Someone who could hear, "I'd like a cheap bunch of flowers once in a while," and respond with, "I hope you choke on them," because the idea of caring for me made him angry. Now, when I think about that dream job phone call, it feels like one of the clearest signs I ignored. That moment wasn't small, it was a warning. It showed me that he wasn't on my team. Because when you love someone, you want good things for them. Even if you're insecure, even if you're struggling, real love can still say, "I'm proud of you." Real love can still make space for your happiness. He couldn't, and then he proved it again and again in bigger and uglier ways, until finally I left. So yes, we are no longer together. And yes, I'm healthier now, and loved better now, and supported properly now. And yes, there's a part of me that still shakes my head at the ridiculousness of him being mean in words, but still not even buying the flowers, as if he couldn't even commit to his own cruelty. But mostly, I feel relief. Relief that I don't have to carry him anymore. Relief that I don't have to shrink anymore. Relief that I don't have to call my partner with good news and brace myself for disappointment. Because I've learned that love isn't supposed to feel like you're begging for proof that you matter. Love is supposed to feel like someone is glad you exist. And that's what I have now. The words still come back to me sometimes in the exact tone he used, like my brain recorded them on purpose so I would never forget what he was capable of. I want to throw you off this balcony right now, and I could, but I won't, because I have a bright future waiting for me even if you don't. He said that while he was choking me, right after he slammed my head into the railing. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't some dramatic thing someone says in a movie. It was real. It was his hands around my throat, the pressure, the panic, the way my body understood before my mind could fully catch up that he could actually kill me if he wanted to. The railing was cold against my head, my vision buzzing, and he was close enough that I could see his face as clearly as he said it, like he was proud of how calm he sounded while doing something so violent. He wasn't just angry, he was making an announcement. He was letting me know, in the most direct way possible, that my life was something he believed he could take if he ever decided to. It was prom night. That's the part that feels unreal when I say it out loud, because prom night is supposed to be this corny, happy milestone. Dresses, pictures, friends, laughing, feeling grown up for the first time. It's supposed to be a memory you look back on as soft and bright, even if it wasn't perfect. But for me, that night became something else entirely. That night was when he showed me, in a way I couldn't explain away anymore, that he didn't just have a temper. He had cruelty. He had entitlement. He had violence in him, and he was willing to use it. Earlier that night, things had already been tense in that way they always were with him. The kind of tension that starts small and then spreads, like you can feel the air changing even before anything happens. I wanted to socialize with my friends. I wanted to have a normal night. I wanted to talk and laugh and move from group to group the way everyone does. At events like that, especially when you're young and everything feels like it matters. But he wasn't allowing it. He was watching me, hovering, controlling where I stood, who I spoke to, how long I spoke to them, and what my face looked like while I did it. If I drifted too far from him, he'd pull me back. If I got too engaged in a conversation that didn't include him, he'd cut in. If I looked like I was enjoying myself, it was like it annoyed him, like my happiness was something he needed to manage. At some point, I got upset. I remember feeling embarrassed, because it's humiliating to feel controlled in front of people you care about. And it's even more humiliating when you can't fully explain it in the moment because you're trying to keep the peace. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want my friends to look at me with pity or confusion. I just wanted to have a normal prom night. I wanted him to stop acting like he owned me. I wanted him to treat me like a person instead of a possession. When I confronted him, he didn't respond with anything even close to understanding. He called me a giant bitch for being upset. Like my feelings were the problem. Like my desire to talk to my friends was some betrayal. Like I was wrong for wanting a little freedom. That word hit me in the way insults do when they're coming from someone you're already afraid of. Because it's not just the word, it's the message behind it. You don't get to have needs, and if you do, I'll punish you for them. And yes, I slapped him. I'm not going to pretend it was the right choice, and I'm not going to pretend I'm proud of it, but I want to be honest about how that moment happened. I was young, I was overwhelmed, I was being verbally attacked and controlled and humiliated. And something in me snapped in that desperate way people snap when they feel cornered. It wasn't some calculated act. It wasn't me trying to win. It was a reaction from someone who had been pushed too far, someone who was already living in a reality where the rules were never fair and the consequences were always worse for me than for him. But his response wasn't a normal response. His response wasn't even a too much response. It was a response that showed me the gap between anger and violence, and how comfortable he was stepping into violence. Because right after that, it escalated in seconds. It went from yelling and tension to him slamming my head into the railing. The impact was sharp, sudden, disorienting. I remember the shock of it more than the pain at first, because my brain wasn't prepared for that level of harm. I remember my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. I remember trying to get my footing, trying to pull away, trying to understand what was happening while it was still happening. Then he was choking me, his hands around my throat, squeezing. Prom night, a dress. A night that was supposed to be safe. And there I was, struggling to breathe while the person who was supposed to be my date, my boyfriend, the person who claimed to care about me, was using his body to overpower mine. That's the part people who haven't lived it don't always understand. It isn't just the physical pain. It's the sudden terror of realizing someone is willing to put their hands on your neck, willing to risk your life, willing to watch you panic and not stop. And while he was doing it, he said that line about throwing me off the balcony. He said he could. He said he wanted to. He said he won't, but not because he cared, not because he was horrified by his own behavior, not because he loved me and snapped out of it. He said he won't because he has a bright future. He said it as if his future mattered and mine didn't, as if I was an object he could discard, and the only reason he wouldn't was because it might inconvenience him. That sentence contains the entire reality of an abusive person. It's not about losing control. It's about control. It's about power. It's about how they see you. He wasn't saying, "I'm sorry, I'm scared, I'm overwhelmed." He was saying, "I could end your life, and the only reason I'm not doing it is because I care about myself." I survived that night. I survived him. I escaped the abuse. And now it has been close to 2 decades. 2 decades is a long time, and in a lot of ways it's a lifetime. I've built a life he doesn't deserve to touch. I'm married now to someone leagues better. Someone who has never made me afraid. Someone who doesn't confuse love with control. Someone who doesn't turn my independence into a threat. My husband is the kind of partner I wish I had known existed back then. Because if I had truly understood what love could feel like, I might have left sooner. I might have recognized how wrong it all was. I might have trusted my instincts instead of letting fear and confusion and that awful cycle of abuse keep me trapped. Even after all these years, I still carry parts of it in my body. People talk about moving on like it's a switch you flip. But trauma doesn't live only in your thoughts. It lives in your nervous system. It lives in how you react to sudden movements, how your stomach drops when someone raises their voice, how you scan rooms without even meaning to, how certain places, certain smells, certain tones can pull you back for a second, even when you're safe now. I have done the work to heal. I have built a better life. I know I'm not that trapped teenager anymore. And still, some memories stay sharp, not because I'm weak, but because what happened was extreme. What adds another layer of exhaustion is that he's still stalking me on and off. He's married. He has kids of his own. He has an entire life he's supposedly living. And yet, he keeps reaching back toward me like he can't let go of the idea that he once had access to me. That's what it feels like. Not love. Not longing, ownership, a need to remind himself he can still reach into my world, even just by watching. It's disturbing in a way that's hard to explain unless you've lived it. Because stalking isn't always loud. Sometimes it's small things that add up. A profile viewing, a message from an account you don't recognize, a random follow, a friend request that looks harmless but makes your skin crawl. A sudden appearance in places that feel too coincidental. It can be quiet enough that you almost question yourself, like maybe I'm imagining it, maybe I'm overreacting. But deep down, you know the pattern, you know the energy, you know that feeling of being observed. And the fact that he has a wife and kids doesn't make it better. If anything, it makes it more unsettling. Because it means he's willing to carry this behavior into adulthood, into fatherhood, into a life where he should have grown up and moved on. It also makes me think about his wife in a way that brings up a complicated mix of emotions. Because if he was capable of choking me and slamming my head into a railing back then, I can't help but wonder what he's capable of behind closed doors now. But I also know it's not my job to save people from him. I had to save myself, and I did. My responsibility now is to keep protecting my life, my peace, and the people I love. When I look back at prom night, what I feel isn't just sadness. It's rage on behalf of my younger self. Because she deserved a normal night. She deserved friends and laughter and pictures and harmless drama about dresses and music. She deserved a boyfriend who felt proud to be with her, not someone who tried to control her like a leash. She deserved safety, and instead she got threatened with death while gasping for air. Sometimes people ask why survivors don't leave sooner, and I wish they could understand how confusing it gets when you're in it. Abuse isn't usually nonstop violence at first. It's control dressed as love. It's jealousy dressed as caring. It's, I just worry about you, that slowly turns into, you can't go there. It's affection that becomes a reward for obedience. It's threats that become normal. It's a world where you're constantly adjusting yourself to avoid the next explosion. And when you're young, you don't always have the language for it. You just know you're nervous a lot. You just know you're always trying to keep things calm. You just know you feel smaller than you used to. What I'm proud of now is that I escaped. I got out. I didn't become the version of myself he tried to create. I didn't disappear. I built a life where love is real, where support is mutual, where my partner is on my team instead of treating me like an enemy. I have a husband who is leagues better, and that isn't just about him being nicer. It's about him being safe. It's about him being steady. It's about him seeing me as a full person, not as something to control. And still, the stalking is a reminder that abusive people sometimes don't fully let go, because what they miss is not you, it's access. It's the feeling of power they once had. That's why it's so important to treat stalking seriously. It isn't annoying. It isn't drama. It's a behavior that can escalate. And it's a behavior that often exists alongside a history of violence, which makes it even more serious. If he's still stalking you on and off, you deserve support and protection around that. Not just emotionally, but practically. Document everything you can, even if it feels small. Save messages, take screenshots, write down dates, and what happened. Keep a simple timeline. Tighten your privacy settings. Consider blocking not just his known accounts, but making your profiles harder to search, limiting who can message you, and making your friend list private if you can. If you have mutual friends, be careful about what you share and who you share it with, because sometimes information travels without people meaning harm. If you ever feel like he's escalating, or if you feel unsafe, trust that feeling and reach out to local authorities or a local domestic violence organization for guidance on restraining orders and safety planning. A person who has choked you before is not someone to downplay. Choking is one of the strongest warning signs for future lethal violence. And you are not being dramatic by taking stalking seriously. You escaped him once, and you built a better life. That matters. He doesn't get to rewrite your future, and he doesn't get to reach into your present just because he can't accept that he lost control. The fact that you're married to someone better doesn't erase what happened, but it does prove what's true now. You got out, you survived, and your life belongs to you. If you want, tell me what stalking on and off looks like lately. Like, is it online accounts, messages, showing up in person, or contacting people you know? I can help you map out a simple safety plan and the best next steps without you having to relive everything all at once. When I asked him if he would go to couples counseling with me, I wasn't asking for something dramatic. I wasn't trying to win an argument or prove he was wrong. I was trying to save what we had left in a practical way. 6 years is a long time to be with someone. That's not a fling. That's shared routines, shared memories, shared plans. and all those little everyday moments that make a life with someone feel real. And after that long, if communication is breaking down, asking for counseling is usually a sign you still care. It's a sign you're willing to do the work. It's a sign you'd rather fix things than throw them away. So, when I brought it up, I expected some kind of adult response. Not necessarily an enthusiastic yes, but at least a real conversation. Even a, "I'm not sure. Let me think about it," would have been something. But he just couldn't answer. He froze. He stared. He hesitated like I had asked him to do something impossible. And that moment alone told me a lot, because it wasn't like counseling was some wild demand. It was literally a structured place for two people to learn how to communicate. But to someone who benefits from poor communication, counseling is threatening. It removes their favorite tools. It makes the rules clear. It brings in a witness. It takes away the ability to twist reality and make you feel crazy. It creates accountability. And some people would rather lose the relationship than lose the power. When he couldn't answer, I pushed a little, because at that point, I was tired of vague half-responses. I asked him if he loved me. Not in a dramatic movie way, but in that quiet, honest way where you're trying to understand what ground you're standing on. After 6 years, it shouldn't be a question that gets met with cruelty. Even if the answer is complicated, there are still kind ways to speak. There are still respectful ways to express doubt. Instead, he said, "It waxes and wanes. Sometimes you're a real bitch." That sentence still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it, because it's such a perfect example of how he operated. He didn't just answer the question. He used the question as an opening to insult me. He took vulnerability and punished it. He took a moment where I was trying to reach him and turned it into a moment where he could cut me down. The waxes and wanes part was cold enough on its own, because it reduces love to something that comes and goes based on his mood, as if I'm supposed to just accept whatever version of him shows up. But the second part was the real poison. Sometimes you're a real bitch. Not sometimes we fight. Not sometimes I feel hurt. Not sometimes I struggle with how we communicate. Straight to name calling. Straight to contempt. And contempt is the part that kills relationships. It's not even the disagreements. It's the way someone looks at you when they disagree. Like they don't just disagree with your words. They disagree with your right to speak at all. That's what I remember too. Those other times when he would stare at me like he actually hated me, when I didn't say what he wanted to hear. Not normal frustration, not a momentary glare. A look that felt like disgust. Like he was thinking, how dare you have an opinion that isn't mine? How dare you be your own person? That kind of look changes you. It makes you start editing yourself mid-sentence. It makes you feel like you're walking into a trap every time you bring something up. It makes you choose silence, because silence feels safer than being stared at like you're dirt. And over time, you start shrinking in your own relationship. You stop sharing. You stop dreaming out loud. You stop asking for what you need. You stop expecting kindness, because expecting it only sets you up for disappointment. Then came the vet school moment, which should have been one of the highest moments of your life. Getting into vet school is not a casual achievement. It's competitive, it's demanding, it takes real discipline and intelligence, and it's proof that you did the work and earned it. That's the kind of news a supportive partner celebrates like it's a holiday. Even if they don't fully understand the field, they understand what it means to you. They say, "I'm proud of you." They say, "You're going to be amazing." They say, "Of course, you'll be a great vet." They show up emotionally because they love you and they want to add to your joy, not drain it. So when you asked him if he thinks you'll make a good vet, you weren't fishing for compliments in some shallow way. You were asking your partner for belief, for support, for that simple reassurance that says, I see you, and I know you can do this. And he said, I don't know, you haven't done it yet. It's almost impressive how consistently unsupportive that is. Because technically, sure, no one has done it yet before they do it. That's how goals work. That's how careers work. That's how becoming anything works. You don't become a vet by already having been one. You become one by studying, training, learning, showing up, failing sometimes, and pushing forward. His answer wasn't practical honesty. It was a refusal to be encouraging. It was him choosing to stay emotionally withholding in a moment where it would have cost him nothing to be kind. And that's the theme, isn't it? It wasn't that he couldn't afford flowers, or didn't know what to say, or didn't have the right words. He just didn't want to offer support. Because offering support would have meant admitting you were capable. It would have meant celebrating you. It would have meant standing beside you, instead of trying to keep you small where he felt safer. 6 years of that kind of treatment can mess with your head. People always talk about physical abuse and obvious cheating, but there's a quieter damage that happens when someone is constantly dismissive of your dreams, constantly insulting you during vulnerable moments, constantly looking at you with hatred when you disagree, and constantly refusing to give you the basic emotional care that makes a relationship feel like a partnership. It teaches you to doubt yourself. It teaches you to over-explain. It teaches you to brace for disappointment. It teaches you to accept scraps and then feel guilty for wanting a meal. But here's what I love about the way your story ends. You didn't just move on. You leveled up in every possible way. You became a doctor. You proved in the loudest, clearest way that his little dismissive comments were never about reality. They were about his attitude. They were about his insecurity and his need to feel above you. You didn't just become good enough. You became excellent. You became the kind of person who can carry responsibility, who can handle pressure, who can achieve something incredibly difficult. And you did it without his support. You did it despite his attitude. That alone says so much about your strength. And now you have a lovely partner, which is exactly what you deserved all along. A person who doesn't treat your vulnerability as an opportunity to insult you. A person who doesn't stare at you like they hate you for having a mind of your own. A person who doesn't act threatened by your ambition. A person who can say, I believe in you, and mean it. So yeah, suck it, you asshole. Not because revenge is the goal, but because it's satisfying to see the truth win. It's satisfying to see your life become proof that you were never the problem. You weren't too much. You weren't a real bitch. You weren't unlovable. You were a capable, driven, intelligent person trying to build a future with someone who didn't deserve access to you. Things were fine for about a year, which is part of why it took me so long to understand what was really happening. In the beginning, he seemed normal enough, even kind in a quiet way. And I remember thinking that maybe this was one of those relationships that would just keep getting better as we settled in. After a year, we moved in together. It was his idea, not mine. And at the time, I took that as a sign that he was serious about me and wanted a real future. I didn't see it as a warning sign or a turning point. I saw it as progress. Looking back now, I can see that the move didn't create the problems. It just removed the space where he could hide them. Once we lived together, there was nowhere for his habits to stay off-screen. There were no longer gaps where I could assume everything was fine. Suddenly, I was seeing him every day, not just in planned moments, and the version of him I lived with didn't match the version of him I thought I knew. Almost right away, things around intimacy started feeling strange. He fell asleep during sex. Not once, not occasionally, every time. At first I thought maybe it was a one-off. Maybe he was exhausted. Maybe I was overthinking it. But it kept happening until it became routine. And the routine started messing with my head. He claimed it was because of his antidepressants, like it was some unavoidable side effect and not something we could work on. I didn't want to be unfair, and I didn't want to shame him, because I knew depression was real and I knew medication could affect people. So I tried to be supportive. I tried to be patient. I tried to adjust my expectations and not take it personally, even though it was hard not to feel rejected when you were in the middle of something that's supposed to be connecting you and your partner just drifts off as if you aren't even there. At the same time, he was clearly not doing well in general, or at least that's what it looked like. He didn't want to leave the flat. He didn't want to do anything that might lift his mood. It was like his world kept shrinking until it was just the couch and the bed and whatever screen he was staring at. I spent months trying to help him with what I thought was depression. I wasn't trying to fix him in some dramatic way. I was trying to do small, normal things that help people feel human again. I suggested dates, even cheap ones, even just walking around the park. I tried to get him out of the flat for fresh air, for movement, for a change of scenery. I tried to make plans that felt easy and low pressure so he wouldn't feel overwhelmed. Every time, he refused. Not maybe later, not I'll try next week, but a flat refusal over and over, like any idea that involved effort annoyed him. A GP offered him a referral to see a psychiatrist, which to me felt like a real step forward, because if he truly was struggling, he deserved proper help. But he refused that too. He didn't want specialist support. He didn't want a deeper assessment. He didn't want to talk about it. He just wanted to take the antidepressants the GP gave him and keep everything else the same. At the time, I thought he was scared or ashamed or just stuck in a bad place. I thought he needed encouragement and love and time. I didn't understand that sometimes people refuse help because help would require honesty, and honesty would expose what they're actually doing. About 3 months after we moved in, money started becoming a problem. It wasn't just tight this month, or we should budget better. It was stress, constant stress, the kind that sits in your stomach and makes you feel like you can't fully relax. Then one day my things started disappearing. Not his things, mine. He told me we were robbed. He acted like it was this awful situation we both had to deal with together, like we were victims of some random thief. But the story didn't make sense. I'm sorry, what kind of thief breaks in and steals Green Day and Offspring CDs but leaves his guitar and his Xbox? Those are the obvious, easy things to take. Those are the things people actually steal. And there were no signs of a break-in whatsoever. No damaged door, no broken window, no mess, nothing that looked like someone forced their way in. It felt staged, and the more he tried to sell the story, the more it felt like he was acting. I called it out, not in a calm, gentle way at first, because I was furious. Those were my things. The items themselves mattered, but what mattered more was the betrayal underneath it. The idea that someone living with you could look you in the face and lie so confidently and expect you to accept it. Eventually, he broke down in tears and admitted it. He had sold my stuff and claimed we were robbed. He tried to frame it like a desperate decision for us, like he did it so we could get money from the sale and from insurance. But even that excuse fell apart the moment you thought about it for more than 2 seconds. At that time, insurance companies were cracking down hard on insurance fraud, and no insurance claim was ever filed. Of course it wasn't. And even if he wanted to commit insurance fraud, his plan was unbelievably stupid. Because he sold everything at the cash converters round the corner from where we lived. It was so close it might as well have been an announcement. There was no unknown thief. There was just him doing something wrong and hoping I'd be too tired or too trusting to push back. 4 months after that, things got worse in a different way. My own phone had broken, and one day I borrowed his phone to play games while he was on his Xbox. It was normal, nothing suspicious, nothing secret. While I was playing, a text came through from his friend Andy. I accidentally opened it, meaning I didn't sit there scrolling through messages on purpose. It just popped up, and my thumb hit it, and suddenly I was looking at words I wasn't supposed to see. It was Lee messaging Andy, complaining that he was bored of the relationship, that I wasn't making any effort, and that everything was stale. That message felt like a slap in the face. After months of me trying to pull him out of the flat, trying to get him to go on dates, trying to get him to take care of himself, trying to keep us afloat emotionally while he refused everything. He was telling someone else that I wasn't making effort. It was like watching someone rewrite reality while you're standing right there living it. We had a blazing argument, not one of those quiet disagreements where you both calm down and talk. It was ugly because I was hurt and angry, and he got defensive instead of honest. He tried to put it down to financial pressure and stress, like the message didn't mean what it said, like it was just him venting. But it was hard to ignore the feeling that he was more comfortable complaining about me behind my back than actually working with me to make the relationship better. It also showed me that he wasn't seeing me as a partner who was trying. He was seeing me as a problem he could blame, and blaming me was easier than looking at himself. 5 months later, we tried to ease the financial pressure by renting a room in my childhood home. Off my mother. She didn't live there, so it wasn't like moving into her active household at first. It felt like a practical solution, like we were downsizing to survive and get back on our feet. I was still in that mindset where I thought if we could just reduce the stress, things would improve. I kept assuming stress was the cause, not the excuse. I kept thinking if we could get through this part, he'd come back to being the person I thought he was. Around that time, I had a hospital appointment. Lee swore up and down he would be there for it. He promised me he'd meet me at the hospital because I'd be coming from work. He confirmed the time and date many times. He made it sound like there was no chance he'd mess it up. Of course, he never showed. I remember the feeling of sitting there, checking my phone, looking at the time, trying not to panic or cry in public, trying to tell myself maybe something happened, maybe he's delayed, maybe he's on his way. But deep down, I knew. I knew because this wasn't the first time he had promised something and then vanished when it mattered. And the fact that he could confirm it, repeatedly look me in the eye, and still not show up, made me realize his words were nothing. His promises were just sounds he made to keep me calm in the moment. A month later, my mother's boyfriend had a heart attack, and then he had a stroke as well, and suddenly everything in my life was chaotic. I was asked to look after my 2-year-old half-brother until he got out of hospital because I had lost my job. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I stepped in because that's what you do when a family member needs help and a small child needs stability. 3 days into watching my little brother, I fell asleep on the sofa. It wasn't laziness. 2-year-olds are notoriously exhausting, and I had pulled an all-nighter trying to figure out our financial situation and applying for any and all jobs. I was desperately trying to fix our life while it was falling apart. On top of that, Lee lost his job the day before, so the pressure felt like it was crushing me from every side. I woke up to my mother coming home, and I knew something was wrong instantly because the energy in the room didn't feel normal. Then I saw it, a post-it note. That's how he ended our entire 2-year relationship at that point. A single post-it note saying he couldn't do this anymore. No conversation, no explanation, no goodbye, no care for the fact that I was caring for a toddler and trying to keep everything together while dealing with hospital stress and job loss. Just a note like I was an inconvenience he could exit with the smallest effort possible. It was so cold that even now, years later, it still feels unreal when I picture it. Who does that to someone who has been trying so hard? Who leaves like that while you're asleep, like you're not even worth waking up? And this is where I still feel angry at my younger self, even though I also understand her, because my dumb ass chased him and took him back. I don't say that because I think I deserved what happened. I say it because I wish I could reach back in time and shake myself and tell myself I didn't need to beg for someone who treated me like that, but I did. I ran after him because I was exhausted and scared and still clinging to the idea that the relationship could be saved. He stayed living at his friend Andy's house. Meanwhile, my mother, very uncharacteristically, told me not to worry about rent and that I could live with her boyfriend, and my half-brother. For a brief moment, I felt relief, like at least I had a stable place to land and I could rebuild. Then, her boyfriend got out of the hospital and everything flipped. Suddenly, I had to pay her rent or get out. That was much more like my mother, and it's part of why we no longer speak. I ended up living with Lee's mother while Lee lived with Andy, which was humiliating in a special kind of way. Imagine being in a relationship where you're still technically together, but you're living with his mother while he's living with his friend, and you're still trying to pretend there's a future. It was like I was clinging to the shell of a relationship while the actual relationship had already died, and I was the only one trying to keep it breathing. Then there were the small cruelties, the ones that aren't dramatic enough for outsiders to instantly see as abuse, but that slowly poison you. He forgot my birthday until his mother reminded him. He showed up too late to do anything, and he picked up a card at the petrol station on the way. It was still in the cellophane. He hadn't even written in it. That detail says so much, because it wasn't just forgetting. It was forgetting and then not caring enough to even fake effort. Later that night, his mother asked me, straight up, why I was with him, and she told me I deserved better. Imagine your boyfriend's own mother looking at you and seeing the truth clearer than you do. That should have been my wake-up call, and in some ways it was, because 2 months later, we finally ended it for real. When it ended, a few things came to light that made everything click into place so violently, it almost made me sick. The depression wasn't real, not in the way he had presented it. The money troubles weren't just bad luck or stress. They were self-inflicted. He was an addict. He had lied to the GP to get antidepressants. He spent all our money on other substances. He sold my stuff to fund his addiction. Suddenly, the robbery lie wasn't just a weird, desperate moment. It was part of a pattern. Suddenly, the refusal to see a psychiatrist made sense because a psychiatrist might have actually seen what was going on. Suddenly, his constant refusal to go out, his lack of effort, his mood, his coldness. It all looked different when you understood he was choosing his addiction over everything else. Then the friend Andy, the one he was always with, the one he lived with, the one he was texting about me behind my back, turned out to be his dealer. That detail alone is like a punch because it rewrites months of your life. It means I wasn't competing with a friendship. I was competing with the supply line. And it means the relationship wasn't just struggling because of stress. It was struggling because I was building a life with someone who was actively lying to me and feeding an addiction behind my back. Even the intimacy issue, the falling asleep during sex, turned out not to be what he claimed. The antidepressant excuse was a cover. While I was sleeping, he was watching porn and masturbating while high as a kite. He was draining himself of arousal and energy in secret, and then showing up to our intimacy, already detached, already numb, already elsewhere. And the part that stung the most was the thought that I just didn't do it for him. Because when you don't have the full story, your brain turns it inward. You start thinking you're not attractive enough, not exciting enough, not enough in some unnamed way. But the truth is, it wasn't about me being enough. It was about him being addicted, dishonest, and emotionally unavailable. I was trying to love a person who wasn't even fully present in his own life. Once I knew the truth, I could finally stop twisting myself into knots trying to solve a problem that was never mine to solve. I had spent so long trying to help him, trying to motivate him, trying to bring him back to himself, trying to keep us afloat financially and emotionally, and he was quietly burning everything down for substances and lies. The effort imbalance suddenly had an explanation, but it didn't make it less painful. If anything, it made it worse, because it meant all that time I thought we were struggling together. We weren't. I was struggling, and he was hiding. Thankfully, my life now looks nothing like that. I'm married to a wonderful man who is also my best friend. The difference is not just that he's nicer, it's that he's steady. He shows up. He doesn't make promises and vanish. He doesn't use me, drain me, or make me carry everything while he lies. He doesn't make me feel like I have to earn basic respect. After reading a lot of other people's stories and being reminded of how bad things can get, I know exactly what I have, and I don't take it for granted. As soon as he finishes work today, I'm hugging him extra tight, not out of fear, but out of gratitude that I made it out, that my life is safe now, and that the love I have is the kind that doesn't come with chaos, cruelty, or constant doubt.
So that's where we'll stop tonight. Before you go, remember this. Every story you just heard was real. Real people, real nights, and none of them saw it coming. If that got to you the way it gets to most people, do one thing before you leave. Hit subscribe. I post new stories all the time, and I don't want you to miss them. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next time.